Yeah, it's funny. I feel like marketers, creatives especially, they're always designing for the best case scenario.
Yes.
They're like, I'm going to assume that I have 30 seconds to tell a story, and then at the end I can do the grand reveal of the logo and tell them who was advertising in the first place. It's like they're never designing for the worst case scenario, which is I'm going to get like half a second at the beginning and then nothing. Even though that's the norm. That's like 90% of people are having the worst case experience, not the best case experience.
Yeah, if you're not designing it for being skipped with sound off for the millisecond, then you're wasting, to your point, 90% of your budget, essentially.
Welcome to Lab Grown Marketing, the podcast rewriting the marketing playbook for the synthetic century. I'm John Lombardo.
And I'm Peter Weinberg. We're bringing together the latest thinking in marketing with the latest breakthroughs in AI.
So if you want to be in the top 1% of marketers, you're in the right place.
On today's episode of Lab Grown Marketing, we will start by talking about the worst case scenario most of us experience where nobody's actually paying any attention to our ads. You have a second to capture attention.
It's not the worst case scenario, it's the scenario.
It's the scenario. It's the most common scenario, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about how you can make the most of that half a second, and it's not going to be through text because nobody can process text in half a second. What they can process are pictures, the picture superiority effect.
Also known as a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Then we will share some data talking about how little time marketers spend actually thinking about visuals and how obsessed they are with messaging and text to their own detriment.
Not us, not I, said the garbed men from the Renaissance.
And finally, we will go to the feed to talk about a new study showing that AI-generated images in ads are much more likely to perform better than the human slop that we were all feeding on before.
Humans continue to get in the way of advertising.
So, welcome back, benvenuti to the laboratorio. Very excited for today's episode. What is today's episode about, Johnny? I can't wait to find out.
Peter's about to find out what today's episode is about. Well, on the last episode, we talked about one of the big trends in AI, which was voice. Today, we're going to talk about another big trend in AI, which is vision.
Ooh, voice and vision.
V&V,
Double
baby.
V.
Voice and vision.
Voice, vision, victory.
And I think we'll start with just a simple kind of statistic, and that will and then I'll tell you a little bit of a story.
What is the statistic?
In our voice episode, we talked about the fact that essentially you can talk 4 times faster than you can type, right? It's 150 minutes talk, 150 words talking per minute, and 40 words if you type. So 4x throughput. In vision, you can process an image in about 13 milliseconds. Text takes about 250 milliseconds. So you can process images about 20 times faster than you can text. And so this is just kind of the way that people process things, which is with vision. And obviously there's a whole thing called computer vision.
There is.
The images the models are not just seeing things, they're producing things now, right?
They're multimodal.
They're
right?
multimodal,
So it was
right?
a large language model. It was all about text, but now they can see, they can hear. They're
They can
basically
talk.
becoming humans.
Right. They're neural networks that are doing all the things that humans can do. So a story about this idea of visual processing and the importance of vision. I often see people who are like, hey, I was on LinkedIn and I was scrolling through LinkedIn and I saw you and Peter. And then they'll always kind of insult me afterwards. They're like,
Yeah, especially you.
Yeah,
Probably
I didn't
say nice
stop to
things
listen
about
to
me.
you.
Right.
and I scrolled past through you guys, so I didn't hear a word you said or see anything you said. But I saw you guys on LinkedIn, and I love this.
Wearing your funny hat.
This is wearing your funny hats. This is my favorite insult. I love this insult. I'd like everybody to insult me with this more because
I'd like everybody to insult John more too.
Because it means we've cracked the code on something super important from a marketing perspective.
Attention, capturing attention.
Yes. Because the constraints on attention are incredibly real. I feel like on every episode we've talked about how scarce attention is. Everything is abundant except for attention is super scarce. And in the feed, there are some realities. You're going to be skipped in the feed. That's
people
the
are
default.
Scrolling.
They're scrolling,
At
they're not
LinkedIn,
staring.
we used to talk about you want a thumb stopper.
Right. I like this idea of they're scrolling, not staring, which is a fundamental mistake people made. So you're going to be skipped. Sound will default be off. And basically, they're going to pay attention for maybe a handful, like some milliseconds. So the default is they're skipping you, the sound is off, and they're not paying any attention whatsoever. And so whatever you do from an advertiser, from a market perspective, has to be basically appealing to people in that environment. That's a very difficult, brutal environment.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like marketers, creatives especially, they're always designing for the best case scenario.
Yes.
They're like, I'm going to assume that I have 30 seconds to tell a story, and then at the end I can do the grand reveal of the logo and tell them who was advertising in the first place. It's like they're never designing for the worst case scenario, which is I'm going to get like half a second at the beginning and then nothing. Even though that's the norm. That's like 90% of people are having the worst case experience, not the best case experience.
Yeah, that's a great way to put, I think, a financial frame on it. Like, if you're not designing it for being skipped with sound off for the millisecond, like us, we're in garb. I see Peter, I see John, no idea what they're talking about. No, it's them in the Renaissance garb. No, it's Evidenza. No, it's AI market research.
I mean, what will they
it.
see in that 1 second? They'll see me and you in our weird costumes. They'll see us holding cards that say Evidenza. In case you miss that, we'll force the video producers to put the logo Evidenza on it. And even in a half a second, what have we done? We've established that we're two people who work at a company called Evidenza. There's a company that Evidenza that exists. Its distinctive style is futuristic Italian Renaissance. We've actually conveyed a huge amount of information in half a second, but we've done that visually.
And I think that's just the default. That's the default setting. That's the default approach now for basically appealing to vision, right? And I don't think people really do that. We'll get into some of the data behind that, but that's kind of how this needs to operate. And if it doesn't operate like this, then you're wasting, to your point, 90% of your budget essentially. Like, we're maybe only getting like 10x, but everyone else is getting 1x.
Yes. So let's go deep into this mental model of the picture superiority effect. Kind of what that is and what some sort of principles are to keep in mind when you are communicating visually.
Can we just call it picture superiority effect, aka a picture is worth 1,000 words?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, that's a meme. Everyone knows that meme, right? But there's a lot in that meme. It's literally saying a picture is 1,000 times more valuable than a word,
right?
Which is definitely true.
It's probably, truthfully, if we look at the math we talked about earlier in this, a picture is worth 20x words, 20x a word, but that's the idea.
So ideally, you're communicating visually and you're communicating your brand visually, which of course means you need distinctive brand assets.
You got it.
Right?
You got it.
Things that let everybody know the ad is from Evidenza and not from Schmeva Schmenza, right? And that's where we have our Italian futuristic Renaissance garb. That's where you have the Geico gecko. That's where you have we
Flow
are
from
farmers.
Progressive. We are
farmers. Right?
And also liberty, 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 liberty,
liberty. I think that's probably the 10th time we've sung that on the podcast.
Listen, it's an earworm. It's
It
just
is an
repeating the
earworm.
same name, the name of the company. That's also like, it doesn't even have to be creative. It just has to be kind of entertaining and fun. It's just liberty, liberty. It's the name of the company 3 times in a jingle.
Yeah, it doesn't have to make
Evidenza,
sense.
Evidenza.
Evidenza. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be memorable, right? And this is the picture superiority effect: is that visuals are more memorable than text.
And this is
you
where
get embedded in someone's
characters-
mind.
Characters are kind of like the whole game. It's the only way to have the creative also be the branding. It's why the gecko is the brand. Flow is the brand.
Yeah, I mean,
liberty is the brand. We are the brand.
We are the
Brand.
brand.
Dun, 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 dun.
I mean, the Geico gecko is basically just the Geico logo, except unlike the Geico logo, it's just a much more versatile asset because it can talk. And you can make a little plushie toy,
You can
and it
put
can
a shirt
like
on
play
it.
a role
Yeah, right.
in the story. So
Yes.
it's just a logo that's actually a storytelling device, right?
We've always loved this idea of the branding has to be integral to the story.
Yes.
And characters also have to be integral to the story. In fact, there can be no story without characters.
Right, central casting. I
Right.
think this is a key point because I think a lot of people read the literature on distinctive brand assets and they're like, I got it. Everything's got to be branded. And they take that in a very literal direction where they're like, I'm going to show the logo in the first second and then the logo is going to be like in the bottom left corner. And to be clear, that's a good place to start. You should definitely do that.
Better than nothing.
But that's like the branding just becomes the frame and the picture is not the branding. Like you
Right,
actually have to cast the brand in the actual creative itself.
Yeah, if there's like a heat map, people pay attention to the center of the image,
Right.
not the bottom right, the bottom left. And that's where the branding typically goes, bottom left, bottom right. And nobody's paying attention there. So it has to be in the center. And the thing that's always in the center is the character.
Right. Right. And so ideally the character is essentially a logo, a brand asset, right?
I think that's in the world we just talked about where the default is you're going to be skipped with the sound off and no attention. Like, I think it's the only way to really win in social or on feeds.
Yeah, I think there's a few interesting aspects of this. I think a lot about Jenny Romaniuk, Professor Jenny Romaniuk, one of our great mentors and the inventor of distinctive brand assets.
She is the best.
And
Go,
there's
Jenny,
something
go.
she always used to say to me, which is branding is mandatory, messaging is
Yeah,
optional.
this is such a hot idea.
So what is she basically saying? She's saying, marketers spend all their time agonizing over messaging. What are we trying to communicate? What's our value prop? And then maybe at the end, they'll spend a few minutes thinking about visually, how it's conveyed, how the branding is embedded in the story. But just like we've been talking about with people only see us for a second in the feed, an ad can work without any message as long as it has the brand, so that you're at least refreshing or building a memory that there's a brand that calls Evidenza that exists, right? So the branding is 100% mandatory. The ad cannot work if people don't know you're the one, you're the brand that's actually advertising. Messaging, entirely optional. You could say nothing. You could just have a picture that just says Evidenza, right? And that would do something for the growth of the brand.
Yeah, I think this will be controversial with a lot of people. I think a lot of people will not like what we're saying here, but this to me is an incredibly interesting idea. The branding is mandatory. The messaging is optional. I think if you ask people to choose, almost everybody, you don't even need to ask them. You can look at ads. The revealed action or the revealed kind of preference is that they don't think the branding is important. It is not central. It's at the very end, right? And so you can just look at the actual ads and see the answer.
And people do stock photography, right? This has always been one of the things that pisses me off most in the world. People are like, I'm using stock. I spent 10 hours working on the message and the value prop, and then I went to Shutterstock and bought a picture of people in suits shaking hands.
This should be
right?
called Shutter Slop.
Shutter slop. Well, it goes back to the slop idea. Everyone's like, oh, we're going to see so much AI slop visuals. It's like, what are you... The slop was from the humans buying the stock photography.
Totally.
All of a sudden in my feeds, I'm seeing fantastical, incredible visuals of elephants riding lions and all of this Dolly-esque crazy shit, right? It's 100 times more visually interesting and distinctive.
Yeah, stock imagery just got a huge upgrade.
Huge upgrade.
Huge upgrade.
Right? It actually, there is no more stock imagery.
No, it's all
because now
what do you want?
everything
Right.
can be whatever you want it to be.
Right.
And also, but this is sort of in the age of efficiency. There was either stock photography or everyone chose this kind of flat minimalist visual style because it was cheap to produce,
Yeah,
because
right,
you don't have to pay a super elaborate illustrator to create the Dolly painting. Now that's just completely trivial for
You can
AI
basically
to do.
get probably 100 times better image for a fraction of the cost of a stock image now. That's a huge upgrade for humanity. We're going to get to look at much more beautiful, entertaining, arresting stuff.
And I think it allows people to take advantage of another one of my favorite concepts, which is the von Restorff effect. I've always been a huge fan of this, which is basically a psychological principle which says that people notice incongruous things. If you show them 10 things and 9 of them all look the same and one of them is totally weird and different from the other 9 things, they're much more likely to notice that one weird, incongruous thing. And now you do really have an opportunity to sort of counter position against how everything else looks. So in our case, you don't meet a lot of AI brands that are Italian, futuristic Italian Renaissance themed, right? So we found something that is distinctive to the category. And then because it's very well defined, this is why we went with futuristic Italian Renaissance, because AI knows how to reliably reproduce images with that prompt, right? A lot of brand guidelines you read are we're modern and bold and sexy. You give that prompt to an AI, you're going to get a totally inconsistent output. If you say I want a futuristic Italian Renaissance painting, these models are trained on thousands of Renaissance paintings. They know how to do that consistently and reliably and distinctively.
The pattern match.
Right.
The pattern match and the pattern production is incredibly high. And also, I've always loved the idea the counter programming idea or the counter positioning idea, this idea of the incongruity. We are dressed up in old style with a new technology.
Right.
We're the only people dressed up in an old style
at
all.
You see a lot of
But old
guys
and new
talking
together is
into
a fun combo.
podcast mics,
Right.
but you don't see a lot of people in Renaissance
And that's what you
costumes.
need in the feed.
That's what you need in the feed. Yeah, even just a very, very tactical thing I always thought was funny is the LinkedIn feed. You're trying to stand out in the LinkedIn feed. It's mostly blue and gray. So if if your images are blue and gray, which by the way most images are because every brand is blue.
Sea of sameness.
You kind of blend in to the advertising medium, but you don't want to blend in. You want to stand out. So if everything's blue, you want to be like bright orange. You want the opposite side of the color wheel, basically.
Yeah, you do not want to be adrift in the sea of sameness. You want to stand out in gold and green like evidenza.
Which is why most life rafts are bright orange, counterpositioned against the color of the sea, right? Because you want to notice them.
That's good color theory. That's Van Gogh. On the color wheel, I'm sure those are
Shout out
colors.
to Van Gogh, huge fan of the pod.
Friend of the pod. Van Gogh, not under trademark. We can use his name freely. He could appear on the pod.
We can. He just has trouble listening to podcasts because he only has one ear.
Well, it's just got to be the left ear he listens with.
Yeah, left ear listening. So I guess the bada bing, bada boom for me is that most communication is meta communication. I've seen this stat in a lot of different places. Like, when somebody's listening to you talk, like 10% of them is processing the words you're using, 90% is processing what you're doing with your hands, and are you making eye contact and the tone of voice. This is all meta communication, right? And that's how marketing and advertising is. Most of the communication is not the text, it's not the message, it's the meta communication. That's the part that really matters.
Yeah, the bada bing, bada boom for me here is, linked into this great research, 81% of advertising is wasted because nobody remembers the brand. So this key idea is, the branding is mandatory. The messaging is optional. I believe that is counter kind of to what everybody believes in the industry. And to prove it, Peter, we're going to segue gracefully
and elegantly, synthetically
into $1 million data. $1 million data.
Yeah, we gotta have a jingle.
$1 million data. It's a jingle all the way kind of day. So, $1 million data. What did we do with $1 million data?
I assume it was a synthetic sample, not real humans. And who did we survey, Johnny?
This is the same as last time. We did 1,000 CMOs, B2B and B2C. And we just asked them a single question, a simple question, to estimate the time they spend on visual design versus kind of messaging creation, right? So it's like, do you prioritize images or do you prioritize text, basically, is the core question here. And what we found is that most people are spending more time on the messaging. 60% said spending more time on the messaging than the visual. In B2B, by the way, was 72% of people.
On the messaging.
So you should be spending more time on images than on text. Nobody's doing that. They're doing the opposite for the most part. Or 60% of them are doing the opposite. And in B2B, no surprise, where people are obsessed with rational, and kind of like explanation and persuasion and speeds and feeds and product, as you say, with product illusion. That's where they're really leaning way too much into text still and not enough into the visual.
Yeah, it makes sense. And they think because their product is complicated that their advertising's got to be complicated, or because their product is boring, their advertising's got to be boring. But I always just love to point out who makes the best advertising in the United States? Car insurance brands. Is car insurance an interesting category? No.
It's super boring.
A simple category? No. Super complicated. And yet I could name like 5 amazing brands in the car insurance space.
The more boring your category, the more interesting your advertising needs to be.
Yeah.
Right? That's like a very simple mental model and what you see.
It's also, I think part of the explanation here, or part of the problem, I should say, is that when you present the copy internally, people can have a kind of rational conversation about is it good or it's bad. The problem with visuals is it's so subjective. Yeah. It's like you bring it to the CMO and they're like, I don't like blue. I like green. I have this green? It's like everybody's just got their own little opinions on the visuals and no one's opinion is right or wrong. But that's where I think AI is an interesting opportunity where you can actually test, is this the right visual? Is it counter-positioned against how other brands appear, right? Like, no, we can't be blue because everyone else is blue. Like, there is a rational way to explain why you chose X visual over Y visual.
Well, I like this idea of objective versus subjective, which I think is also a good segue into the piece of research we're going to talk about now. But you're right. These things are like, the thing that matters is performance. So it's not really subjective. It's kind of like you should produce 2 pieces of creative, and it could be text or it could be images, and then it's just the performance that decides, right? As long as it's on brand, it's the story you want to tell, then it's just the performance of the creative that determines it. And in order to kind of tease this out more, there was a very interesting piece of research that came out from some professors at NYU and Emory.
Ooh, love NYU and Emory. We've poached a lot of students from NYU.
Yeah, we love NYU. The Violets.
Violet. I'm turning violet.
Purple. We love your purple, Violet. So what they did is they basically created images using Gen AI, and then they ran them on the Google Display Network. and they asked people in a lab to rate their purchase intent and basically how much they liked the ads, right? Like they asked them to like, would you click? Would you buy? And what they found, actually the click data is real click data. The intent data is asking them if they would buy. And what they found is that Gen AI created ads, so no human involved, purely Gen AI, had 19% higher click-through rate than human created ads.
Damn.
That's a huge lift.
Huge lift.
19%.
90% is no joke.
Huge.
And
then
as if that's not enough,
they
what
also
about purchase
showed
intent?
that the purchase intent was 47% higher from purely Gen AI created ads.
Wow.
So you're basically saying like people are going to click and they're going to buy.
Yeah,
The fun thing is they gave humans the ability to change ads if they wanted to, and they tested those ads too. And those ads underperformed the Gen AI only created ads.
I've seen a few versions of this study. I saw one with poetry where like you gave people poems written by humans and AI, and everybody preferred the AI written poems, right? So this is all just like so contra to the narrative of slop, right? All the ads are going to be slop. You can never make an ad as good as a human creative director. Like this is somewhere at the bottom of the funnel. You just have performance data. Like did it perform better at a 19% higher click-through rate, right?
This is interesting though. If you tell people that the ad is created by Gen AI, then ad effectiveness went down 32%.
It's amazing. Right. Nobody wants to know it. I actually have a funny story about this from our own business where we have a CMO. I'll let him remain nameless for now. And he presented our synthetic research to his team, and everybody was pushing back and no, it can't be that. It's got to be this, blah, blah. Everybody had their opinions. And then he just tried it again with a different group, and he just didn't tell them it was AI generated. It was synthetic. It didn't tell them it was synthetic research. And everyone was like, oh my God, this is so bang on. Like, how did you produce this perfect encapsulation of what we hear from our customers every day, right? So there is so much bias and mistrust of AI. People talk about bias of AI. It's like the bias of humans against AI. You know, this is just yet another example. Once you tell people it's an AI-generated ad, all of a sudden they didn't like the ad that they just clicked on at a 19% higher rate, right?
There's also the Waymo kind of story that is going around now.
What's that story?
Waymo is basically like Gen AI for driving, right? It's autonomous driving. It's AI for driving. And those cars are incredibly safe compared to humans. Like,
Right.
I don't know what the numbers are. They're like 10, 20x safer than humans. Like, you will literally save lives by not having humans drive cars. I'm not saying there shouldn't be some humans driving cars. We don't want to kind of remove the joy of driving for some people, but like, it's unequivocal through the data that like, it's better to have the AI do it than the human do it. That's the same thing that you're seeing here. It's better to have autonomous advertising than human advertising. But if you tell the humans, then all of a sudden they don't like it. So this is this very interesting kind of cognitive paradox.
It
here,
is.
or cognitive
The other,
confusion.
the cognitive bias or paradox here is we see it in our own work where people think they're comparing imperfect AI to perfect humans.
Yeah.
And that's not what you're comparing.
No,
you're comparing imperfect synthetic research to imperfect human research, right? In the driving example, it's like if one person gets hurt by a self-driving car, everyone's like, we got to pass legislation banning self-driving cars. How many humans kill other humans in cars every year? It's literally like 100,000 plus or something like that.
AI
right?
is held to a much higher
a much
standard,
higher standard.
whether it's cars or advertising or research.
Right.
And by the way, I think that is something that we have to talk more about. That's a great episode we should talk about in the future, like the ceiling and what the actual ceiling is.
That's great. Well, it sounds like we have an idea for a future episode.
Ooh.
And on that note, we can end today's episode on the picture superiority effect. Do you want to do a quick bada bing, bada boom?
I think my bada bing, bada boom is designed for the scroll, not the stare. Right? Everyone thinks people are going to stop and stare and pay a ton of attention. And as we said, they're going to skip you. There's going to be no sound and they're going to pay zero attention. So designed for the scroll and not the stare.
Right. And thanks to the AI that you all hate, the bada bing, bada boom for me, you don't have to use boring stock photography or that stupid little illustration style that you're all using. Now you can do weird, surrealist, futuristic, Renaissance paintings, and you'll be a lot more likely to perform better in the feed, which is what all of the research is already saying. The AI-generated ads are better, not worse, than the human-generated ads.
The real slop photography is stock photography.
Thanks for listening. Grazie mille. Grazie mille for listening.
Ciao for now. Remember to test before you invest.
Well, I think that's it for this week on Lab Grown Marketing.
Make sure to join us next time for another episode on marketing effectiveness and AI intelligence.
And if you want to stay ahead of the two biggest revolutions in marketing, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn.
I'm Jon Lombardo, you're Peter Weinberg. And if you're ready to see what lab-grown research and strategy can do for your brand, please visit us, of course, at evidenza.ai. Ciao for now.